I didn't know my life was about to change the moment Jake clapped me on the back and smiled like he was hiding a secret. At the time, I thought it was just another workday on the outskirts of Portland. The kind of day that starts before sunrise and ends with sore arms and sawdust stuck to your skin. I'm Liam. I'm 25, and I work as a carpenter. I build houses that all look the same, one after another, like copies of a life I never really questioned. I lived alone in a small, rented one-bedroom house with creaky floors and a faucet that leaked no matter how many times I tightened it. My mornings were always rushed. Black coffee, toast if I remembered, then out the door before the sky fully woke up. By the time I reached the site, the crew was already unloading lumber. Jake, my foreman and closest friend, was there like always, barking orders with a grin that never seemed to fade. Jake had been married for years, kids at home, and he treated me like a younger brother. He was always pushing me to do more than work and sleep. He liked to remind me that life wasn't just nails and beams. I usually shrugged him off. The truth was simple. I wasn't good with girls. Never had been. My last date was more than a year ago, and it ended so awkwardly we never spoke again. That day, during lunch, while rain misted down like it always does in Oregon, Jake pulled me aside. He told me about a blind date. A friend of a friend. Single. Nice. Someone he thought I should meet. I told him no. I told him I wasn't interested. But Jake didn't back off. He said she was special and that I should just show up, have coffee, and be polite. I agreed just to shut him up. One afternoon couldn't hurt, I told myself. If it was weird, I'd blame him. Saturday came faster than I expected. I spent the morning in my garage, sanding an old oak table I'd salvaged from a demolition site. Restoring furniture was my escape. Taking something damaged and making it useful again made sense to me. By afternoon, I showered, scrubbed the dirt from my hands, and put on my cleanest blue shirt. On the way to the cafe, I stopped at a flower stand near the riverfront. The old vendor suggested white daisies, simple and sweet. I bought them, even though holding flowers made me feel like I was pretending to be someone else. The cafe was quiet and warm, tucked into downtown Portland. Brick walls, soft yellow lights, the smell of cinnamon and coffee filling the air. Jake had told me she'd be by the window, wearing a pine green coat. I scanned the room and saw her sitting alone, looking out at the rain tapping against the glass. Her name was Clara. From a distance, she looked calm, brown hair tied back. Simple clothes. But as I stepped closer, I saw it. The right side of her face was scarred. Old burns, pink and uneven, a long scar pulled slightly at her cheek and jaw. It wasn't subtle. It told a story before she ever spoke. I stopped without meaning to. Not because I was disgusted, but because I was caught off guard. Jake's words echoed in my head. She's a bit special. My heart raced as I tried to figure out how to act normal. She noticed me then. Her eyes met mine, sharp and aware, like she was used to reading people in seconds. I forced a smile and asked her name. She nodded and smiled back, cautious but kind. I set the daisies on the table, and she thanked me like it was the most natural thing in the world. Up close, the scar was clearer, but so were her eyes. Hazel. Steady. She didn't flinch when I looked at her. We ordered coffee and started talking slowly, carefully, like testing thin ice. I focused on her words, not her scars, even though I could feel other people glancing our way. She told me she was an illustrator, working mostly from home. I told her about carpentry and restoring old furniture. The conversation flowed easier than I expected. She laughed softly, and something in my chest loosened. Then she looked at me and said it plainly. She pointed out what I hadn't mentioned. "You're not asking about the scar." The words hung between us. I told her the truth. I'd ask if she wanted me to, but I didn't think it was my business. Her shoulders relaxed, and she let out a breath she'd been holding. She said most people stared or pretended not to, but it was always there. We sat in silence for a moment, rain streaking the window beside us. She told me it was from an accident, and that the story could wait. She wanted to know about the table I was restoring instead. As she leaned closer to look at the photos on my phone, our shoulders almost touched. The surprise faded. The awkwardness faded. What remained was something quiet and unexpected. When we left the cafe, we exchanged numbers. As I stepped back into the drizzle, I realized Jake hadn't tricked me into a bad date. He'd pushed me towards something I wasn't prepared for. And I didn't know yet how deeply it would change me. I didn't expect Clara to text me the next morning, but when my phone buzzed while I was tightening bolts on a frame, my heart jumped. Her message was simple. She thanked me for the coffee and said the scones were as good as she promised. I replied without overthinking, asking if she wanted to walk through a park sometime. The words felt easy, like I wasn't forcing myself into a role. She suggested Laurelhurst Park early Saturday morning, before it got crowded. I understood why, and I respected it. That morning, the air smelled like wet soil and pine. I stopped at a bakery on the way and bought too many pastries, like I didn't know how to do anything halfway. Clara was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench beneath a massive oak tree. She had a thermos beside her and a sketch tablet on her lap. When she waved, her smile was real, not guarded like the first time. She poured tea for both of us, ginger with honey, and the steam curled into the cool air. We talked about our week. I complained about a roof truss that nearly took out a window. She laughed and told me about an editor who made her redraw the same character 5 times. Then she asked if she could sketch. I told her I'd love to watch. Her hand moved carefully across the tablet. I noticed how she adjusted her grip, how she worked around the stiffness in her fingers without making it obvious. She drew a fox first, bright and alive, then switched to something quieter, a self-portrait. Half her face was in light, half in shadow. The scar was there but softened, like it was fading into the background. She told me she did those sketches for herself, to process things. After a while, she stopped drawing and looked out over the pond. Ducks drifted by, and kids' laughter echoed faintly in the distance. She said she hadn't been sure about meeting again. People often said yes, but then pulled away later. I told her I was glad she didn't. Then she told me about the accident. 4 years earlier, driving home in heavy rain, a truck ran a red light. The crash. The fire. Waking up weeks later in a hospital bed, bandaged and confused, the burns on her face and hand. Surviving, but not unchanged. She spoke calmly, like it happened to someone else, but I could hear the weight beneath her words. She said friends drifted away after that. Dating stopped. People saw the scar first and decided who she was before she opened her mouth. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush to comfort her. I just listened. When she finished, I rested my hand on the bench between us, palm up. She stared at it for a long second, then placed her fingers in mine. Her hand was cool, steady, real. From then on, we started seeing each other more. Walks along the river, coffee runs after my shifts, long conversations that didn't feel planned. She showed me her favorite quiet trails where she liked to sketch. I showed her my workshop, the half-finished furniture pieces scattered around like stories waiting for endings. One evening, we sat on a grassy hill watching the sun dip behind the bridges. She said the city made her feel small in a good way. I told her she made the city feel quieter somehow. That's when I suggested the concert. A free outdoor show by the river. Music, food trucks, people everywhere. She hesitated, and I knew why. But she agreed, as long as we arrived early. When I picked her up, she wore a light scarf around her neck and face. She looked nervous, trying to hide it. At first it was fine. We spread out a blanket near the back, shared popcorn, commented on the music. But as the crowd grew, I noticed the looks, the whispers, the double takes. I felt her tense beside me. Then someone said it, quietly but loud enough. She froze. She pulled her scarf higher and stood up, saying she should go. She told me I could stay and enjoy the show. I grabbed her wrist gently and pulled her aside to a quieter spot. She asked if I was embarrassed, if this was too much. I told her the truth, that I wasn't embarrassed, that the stairs weren't about us, that I wanted to be there with her. When we went back, she held my hand tightly. She leaned into me during the next song, her head against my shoulder. She cried once, silently, then wiped her cheek and smiled like she'd won a private battle. Walking back to the car later, the night air cool against our skin, I knew something had changed. Not just between us, but in me. I wasn't just curious anymore. I was choosing her. After that night at the concert, nothing between us needed to be said out loud. We didn't sit down and define what we were. We just kept showing up for each other, and somehow that felt stronger than any label. Our days blended into each other in small, steady ways that made life feel fuller. Most evenings, I'd stop by her place after work, still smelling like wood and dust. Clara never complained. She'd laugh and hand me a glass of water or tea, telling me to sit while she finished whatever she was drawing. Sometimes she'd be curled up on the couch with her tablet, brow furrowed in focus. Other times she'd be in the kitchen, experimenting with recipes that usually turned out better than she expected. We took long walks along the river, the water moving beside us, like it had nowhere else to be. The city lights reflected off the surface, and she'd point out shapes in the ripples like they were sketches waiting to be finished. We talked about books, about places we'd never been, about nothing important at all. Those were my favorite conversations. There were hard days too. Some mornings, she'd wake up quiet, her confidence shaken by something as small as a stranger's look at the grocery store. On those days, she'd sit with her tablet untouched, staring at the screen like it had betrayed her. I learned not to rush her. I'd sit beside her, close but not crowding her, my arm there if she wanted it. Most times, she did. On my bad days, when work went wrong or a client changed their mind for the 5th time, she became the steady one. She'd tell me silly stories, make up characters from my tools, a stubborn hammer, a brave saw. She had a way of turning frustration into laughter without trying too hard. My birthday came quietly. I hadn't planned anything and I didn't expect much. Work ran late, and by the time I got home, rain was tapping against my windows. There was a note on my door. It was from her. Just a few words telling me to come over after I cleaned up. Her apartment smelled like food when I arrived. She'd made dinner. Simple but thoughtful. We ate by candlelight, talking about our day like it was any other evening. Afterward, she handed me a wrapped frame. Inside was a drawing. It was us, sitting under the oak tree at the park where we'd first held hands. The light filtered through the leaves just like that morning. She'd drawn her scar clearly, honestly, not hidden or softened. It was part of the picture, part of her. I felt something tighten in my chest. She told me she wanted me to see us the way she did. No shadows, no shame. I couldn't speak for a moment. I just held her hand, feeling the truth of it all settle in. I'd never been given something so personal, so real. From then on, being with her felt like a choice I made every day, and one I never questioned. When people stared, I didn't tense up anymore. I held her hand tighter. When she hesitated, I stayed. One evening, as we sat watching the rain slide down the glass, she asked me a question she'd clearly been holding in for a while. Is appearance really that important? I looked at her, really looked at her. Not just her face, but her strength, her kindness, the way she kept creating even when it hurt. I told her the only thing that mattered was how someone made you feel when the world got loud. She leaned into me, her head resting against my chest, and for the first time I felt like I wasn't just fixing broken wood anymore. I was building something that could last. The question stayed with me after she asked it, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I realized how many times the world had answered it for her in the worst way. People had decided for her. They judged, whispered, looked away, and without meaning to, they'd taught her to question her own worth. I wanted to undo that, even though I knew I couldn't erase the past. What I could do was stay. Fall came slowly, leaves turning gold along the sidewalks, the air sharper in the mornings. Clara and I kept our rhythm, grocery runs together. Quiet dinners, sketches spread across her table while I sanded a chair in the corner of her living room, sawdust collecting on the floor she pretended not to notice. One afternoon, she asked if she could come to one of my job sites, just to see where I spent most of my days. I hesitated, not because of her, but because of the people. Construction sites weren't gentle places. But she saw the pause and said she didn't want me to protect her from life. So I said yes. She stood beside me that morning in a borrowed hard hat, hands tucked into her jacket pockets. A few guys stared. One said nothing. Another nodded politely. Jake noticed her immediately and walked over with a wide grin. greeting her like he already knew she mattered to me. He didn't ask questions. He didn't comment on her face. He talked to her about art, about kids, books he read to his daughter. Clara relaxed after that. On lunch break, we sat on a stack of lumber, sharing sandwiches. One of the crew glanced over a little too long. I felt her tense beside me. Without thinking, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. She squeezed back. Later, as we drove home, she looked at me and smiled softly. "Thank you for not making me feel like something fragile." That night, she stayed quiet longer than usual. Then, sitting on the couch, she told me something she hadn't told anyone else. After the accident, after the surgeries, she'd promised herself she wouldn't hope for much. Hope made things hurt more when people left. Loving from a distance felt safer. "I didn't plan to fall for you," she said. "I planned to be careful." I told her I hadn't planned it either. I just followed the feeling that kept pulling me back to her. The first time I kissed her wasn't dramatic. No fireworks. No perfect timing. It happened on a calm evening, rain tapping the window like it always did. She was talking, mid-sentence, then stopped. Looked at me like she was asking a silent question. I leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Her lips were warm, hesitant at first, then sure. When we pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine, breathing steady. No fear. No doubt. From then on, we faced the world together. The looks didn't disappear. The whispers didn't stop. But they mattered less. Clara started wearing her scarf less often. Sometimes, not at all. Each time she did, it felt like a small victory she didn't announce. One evening, months later, we walked past the cafe where we first met. She stopped, looked through the window, and laughed quietly. "You almost turned around," she said. I admitted it. I told her I'd been surprised. Afraid of seeing the wrong thing. Afraid of what I didn't understand yet. She squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you stayed." So was I, because the truth was simple. I hadn't been tricked into dating a girl with facial burns. I'd been given the chance to see past what most people stop at. And what I found was love that didn't ask to be easy. It only asked to be real.